recorded. And when we're done, it will be posted up on the Broadband for All portal. My name is Laura Sasaki. I am the Broadband Initiatives Manager here at the California Department of Technology, working in the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy. Next slide, please. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We do have ASL interpreters. They are spotlighted. So if you do need this functionality, please ensure that you have the side-by-side speaker mode enabled on your view. We also have closed captioning available. And in the chat, I would like to invite everybody who is here to introduce yourselves, say hi to each other, let us know who you're with, and if you can, where you're joining us from. When we get to the conversation piece of it today, please use the raise hand feature in the reactions so that we can see that you want to come off mute and come on camera and talk with us. Great, thank you. Next slide, please. So just briefly, what we'll be going through today is just some key takeaways from our last meeting in February, or our first meeting in February, rather. We'll have an opening panel, kind of a conversation starter for the rest of the conversation that we will be having in the community discussion. And then we'll have a section on some updates on how to take action, and we'll also review what the next steps are for the main meeting and then kind of close out. So next slide. So just an overview of what we will be looking at for the outcome area working group objectives. Next slide. So I'm going to actually introduce, I think she was at our meeting last time, but Kamal Gill is our graduate student researcher who is helping support digital equity here for the Department of Technology. And Kamal is going to talk a little bit about the takeaways from the February meeting. So Kamal, I would like to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kamaljeet Gill. I'm a Master's of Public Policy student and a graduate student researcher supporting the statewide digital equity plan. So last month, we had some great discussions around what is digital equity and why it's important. We also reviewed the statewide digital equity plan process and the planning components. And we also heard from some great expert panelists and community members. Some of the key takeaways from our conversation were around availability of ISPs and adequate connectivity is a barrier. So this means like some rural areas only have 1 to 2 providers. Some rural areas have a lot of freezes and lags, and this is an issue not only to the rural areas, but also in pockets of urban areas that we heard. Next big barrier was around affordability, and both the cost of devices and the connectivity can be expensive for families. And there are price increases that happen in connectivity. Specifically in rural areas where it's already hard to reach in terms of broadband and already expensive to connect. We also heard about the adoption to internet and broadband, or the lack of, how some students' learning experiences aren't as fulfilling due to lack of connectivity at home, specifically families facing poverty. And this is true for K through 12 students, but also students attending colleges and university. We also learned about digital literacy and the need for digital skill set for our teachers and parents to ensure student success. Parents can be more involved in their student educational lives if they're given the right tools and learning experiences on how to engage with the education system through technology. Also, we talked about digital literacy on online safety for parents, for students, and for educators. Lastly, we saw how COVID-19 really forced all of us organizations and institutions to get innovative and faster in their new and previous strategies to help students and families meet their broadband needs. We saw some, programs that came out of COVID-19 alongside serving other basic needs for students. They were also serving hotspot needs, distributing devices, But we also realized that hotspots were only useful where broadband was available in those regions. So there's still, work to be done. And if you're interested in reviewing last month's meeting, a recording, you can find that on the Broadband for All portal under past events. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. So our opening panel today is going to be kind of our conversation starter, and I want to encourage folks to engage in conversation, not only in the chat. That's definitely a great place for that to happen as you're hearing things in the conversations that we're going to be having next, but also make sure that you are also thinking ahead to when we have the community discussion portion. Because that's when we would love to have you come off of mute, turn your video on, and interact with us. And so again, this is kind of to get the conversation started. I also want to introduce, we have Jeff Below. He is with the California Department of Education. Phil Neufeld, he is with Fresno Unified School District. Sade Williams, Parent Institute for Quality Education, and Augustine Urbiles with the California Emerging Technology Fund. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jeff for some of our opening comments and remarks on disparities in education that we are seeing through the digital equity process and lens. Jeff.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, it's a great panel to be on here with Phil and Sade and Augustine. Definite partners and champions of the same challenges that we all have here. Talking about disparities in the education space, you really backwards, taking a step back first to looking at what digital equity and inequity is. We always focus on whether students have access to devices, whether students have access to connectivity. And Kamaljeet just explained some of those challenges we have with connectivity we learned in February. And then also access to training and support, both for instruction and pedagogy, and then also the device, just support for families and kids and both at school and at home. When one or two or three of those elements are missing, we end up with disparities in education space. If a teacher's really utilizing some great new pedagogy and really opening up the world of the digital world to kids, and the kids don't have access to devices or don't have access to connectivity at home to do their work, and other kids in class do have access to, some kids do and some don't, there's a gap right there, and the digital divide just grows every single day. And that's the challenge that we often we're starting to see more and more. It also goes to those late adopters in the world where, some teachers are really pushing the envelope and some aren't, but they have everything else. And so you have disparities there, especially if one fifth grade teacher is pushing the envelope, other one isn't, and kids are, not getting the support. So it's tough because it's not just a simple thing when it comes to the experience students have and families have and in their education, but it definitely is becoming more and more apparent. It was kind of like the last bullet there. Everybody kind of was talking about it before March of 2020, but then when everything went digital and online, it became crystal clear after March of 2020 where the disparities and the challenges were. One thing that's come afterwards that we're starting to see more and more, both from us and our friends in the library space, is that training and support and help for everybody on managing all this digital world. Folks are reporting that, they're losing 20, 30, 40, 50% of their devices when they check them out, whether hotspots or whatever. And it's like, how do we navigate that? We're talking about the fact as a high school senior way back in the 80s, I'm old, we're all getting ready to march as a senior, and we're looking around going, where's John? oh, John didn't pay for his algebra book January, in freshman year, he never checked it back in. And so John wasn't able to march with us until he settled his textbook fee. How does that equate and translate now into the digital world? And, I'm a kid who something happened to my technology, is that going to keep me later? We had processes and things in place back then, where we worked it out for those materials. And it's like, how does that fit now? Both from a practical and then also just from a stewardship perspective. I don't know how we can keep asking the taxpayers to continue to support, and well, we lost half of our devices, we need 50% more. It's like, so there's that part of the training and support that goes and it's creating bigger inequities when kids we don't have access to it. And I guess I bring that all to where we're at as a department is we're really struggling and trying to figure out and put a face on this actual challenge. It's like you hear all these things anecdotally, but we don't have solid data. We haven't had solid data even since the beginning. It's like, how many kids have devices? We knew how many connected out, and so I think trying to figure out and put a program in place so we can really collect and understand the data without it being burdensome to our K-12 schools would go a long way to help us. Another challenge that we're starting to look at, we need to try to figure out, and I know that's come up a lot, is how do we, it's a good thing that during the pandemic, we put universal meals in for California kids, and it's a good thing that we've instituted that permanently, but how do we then identify our students who would normally have been on a free and reduced price meal, because they applied for it? How do we use that? Because those numbers are used for a lot of different specialized funding and for this very purpose. I mean, actually, we talk about ACP here. That's a qualifier for ACP. And so trying to put a program in place so we can continue to capture that information so that students can receive the services they really need. A lot of challenges here and not too many answers right now, I guess, Laura. Hopefully we'll be able to figure some of these answers out and these solutions out during the course of our next time here.
Well, I appreciate that so much, Jeff. Thank you for sharing just some of the challenges that you're seeing. And I think, we obviously want to also have a discussion about where we are seeing successes and programs that are working and partnerships that can be forged to help close that digital divide. So I think what you've presented is a really good segue and pivot to talking to Philip Neufeld from Fresno Unified, because I know, Philip, you're seeing a lot of these things. Jeff is looking at things from the overall state perspective and level, and you are at one of the largest school districts in California. What are you seeing as some of those inequities and barriers in education, and what programs have you seen also that have been able to sort of help bridge that divide?
I'll share a bit of our journey in Fresno Unified, talk about what it looks like, and also what we're doing. So first of all, and thank you, Laura, for the invite and to be on this panel and also with this community. We've all got our work cut out for us. Fresno Unified has 70,000 students, and 89% of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. So yes, high in poverty, yet rich in assets, students, staff, and teachers, and strengths when we create the right conditions, right? I've co-led since 2016 our personalized learning initiative. That's where over 1,000 teachers across over 50 of our schools have transformed their teaching practices to better prepare students for a world that is dynamic, technology infused, and as I call it, as yet imagined, right? Anytime I think I know what the jobs are of the future, someone says, oh, managing an OpenAI chatbot. Okay, new job, right? So this morning I walked classrooms at an elementary school where teachers were personalizing and blending the learning, using an intentional and effective use of digital learning resources. The students were engaged in rigorous, relevant learning experiences. It was a joy for me, to see teachers continue to improve their learning practice, their teaching practices, and students becoming future ready. Fresno Unified provides students with one-to-one laptops and commercial hotspots, all good. But when these students leave the campus, almost a huge portion of them are either unserved, underserved, or unconnected. And that means they don't have access to the quality wireline or cellular internet service that you and I probably enjoy. They can't engage in learning beyond school. What a travesty for our society, our country, our state, right? And our region. They don't have access to the rich, engaged, and adaptive learning resources like Khan Academy. And our teachers are then go, oh gosh, I can't give them that assignment because they won't be able to access it. So it almost reinforces that. So meanwhile, students in more affluent areas have high-speed broadband as well as ubiquitous and fast cellular services. What does that mean? Well, those students, they have access to and use adaptive learning resources that accelerate their learning and amplify the outcome gap. So I get a little passionate about that. I apologize. Now, this is fact-based research that digital inequity creates disparities in educational outcomes. I did my research on that when I was at Fresno State, and we were doing a similar kind of initiative, gosh, years ago, and been doing research around this since. So there's lots of research that technology use, when done well, intentionally, leads to better learning outcomes. But that doesn't happen if you don't have access at home. So digital equity also means that students living in poverty conditions don't have access to the available resources beyond school for online learning and digital tutoring, healthcare and jobs, and participation in society. We lose generation after generation, and it's been too long. So this impacts our workforce, our entrepreneurial base, and our society, since these students are left out of the modern world. It also impacts their families. And we've known since the pandemic, mostly we knew that before, that a family that's well off, both social, emotionally, financially, are going to be more supportive for the students' learning. What does this look like? And it's been over the last couple of years that we've gone from, oh gosh, a student has a challenge, what do we do about it, to during the pandemic, I call it the neighborhood network problem, but it was happening everywhere across our area. Here's what I've seen. I'm going to show you some data maps in just a second. Digital disinvestment in areas of rural and urban poverty, especially multi-dwelling units. This especially affects students of color and those in poverty. I mean, literally, the lines of those maps are congruent. Broadband internet services that don't work as advertised, cost more than people can afford, and deliver less per dollar than in areas of affluence. And there's no choice in the Fresno unified market, really. A regulatory environment that allows carriers to choose where they invest based upon marginal return to shareholders. Cellular services, I mean, I've literally said, you walk with your AT&T, you walk with your T-Mobile, let's walk through our different areas of poverty, and that's a lot of Fresno. And those cell signals don't work in these areas as well. All right, now let me talk about going from this neighborhood network problem that was anecdotal, and you hear the kid at Taco Bell, which is anecdotal and critical. And let's talk about quantitative data. So we said, okay, how do we actually start tracking this? We built an app, My Quality of Internet. Brian Alvarado, one of our software engineers here, built that. Had some vision, but he had the smarts. Now, it's open source, anyone can use it, Windows and also Chrome. We've got over 8 million measurements from 60,000 laptops. Now is the moment where we can do something at scale, big data, crowd scale. So the first map, so if you go to first vision there, visual, just step one slide back, please. Oh, no, you're there. No, one more slide back, sorry. Thank you. All right, so the FCC says in Fresno County, million population, 2.3% unserved. CPUC says 3%. Now the census, pretty rigorous, knocking on doors, said 17% unserved. Microsoft's digital equity dashboard, which is more rigorous sampling, said 50% unserved. That's a much bigger number, right? Now, with My Quality of Internet, on the next slide, what we'll see for the city of Fresno with 500,000 residents. So if we go to the next slide, thanks. You'll see here a heat map of My Quality of Internet data. Again, the FCC says only about 9,300 in the city of Fresno unserved. Based on our actual data that's coming back about real life experience of internet speeds, we're seeing of our students alone, 72,000 residents unserved. Now you extrapolate that based on households that don't have a Fresno Unified student, and some folks from the city and I came up with a number of 136,000 out of our 500,000. That is significantly problematic for our district. So what are we doing about that? Actually, one more slide, because I want to point out one other interesting thing here. On the next slide, we've actually got 17% of our students who over a year, even though they have a district laptop, haven't connected. I've got some theories about why, but I've actually, Education Superhighway Bridge to Broadband did get data from AT&T and Comcast. And we've actually got them asserting that there's spots they can't even deliver to. A little different than the CPUC maps, which suggest, right? That's the kind of problem we've got. That is not driving equity. It's not driving the outcomes we need as a state. So what have we done? One is we brought leased fiber across our district. It was about a 6-year fight to get a competitive bid, and CVN or Vast Networks won that bid. It gets us 20 to 100 times the speed at our schools, greater resilience, and reduces cost. Put better Wi-Fi in classrooms. We're also doing that in common areas so community members can connect with the guest network. And we've also got Wi-Fi in school buses. We put that on 7 years ago and we refreshed that since. One-to-one laptops, technology supports. We're also building a private LTE network that'll cover 80% of our district when it's done. So January 2024-ish. And Jeff, if you can knock on the Division of State Architects door, that could be sooner, right? That'll be 50, 70-foot poles, in some cases on top of the schools. So that's part of the notion about to and through. How do we, as anchor institutions, libraries, schools, healthcare, actually start to create that footprint of it in connectivity? And then I'm also one of the founding folks who put together the Open Education Analytics, Microsoft Education to sponsor that, driven it. It's an international effort. There's in it for us data on internet access, device access, digital resource access, the student information system, learning management system. There are new ways of gathering the data to tell us what's working, where it's working, and how do we make it work across the board and equitably, right? And so, Jeff, I'd love to have conversations around that. How do we get, and there are other states that are moving on this, and I know you guys, Department of Education, do some great work. There's an opportunity here to do things at scale that we've never done before. And these things can work for large and small districts. We're all in the same game together. When our students, regardless of where they live, succeed in California, we all win. I'll turn it back to you, Laura, and look forward to hearing from you, Sade.
Thank you, Philip. Great to hear what Fresno Unified has been doing. And again, it's a very, very large district, very, very diverse, but really appreciate the approach that you've been taking over many years to help bridge that. So I would like to go next to Sade Williams. And I think it's a perfect segue from talking about what schools are doing, the needs that we're seeing with students, and then like bridging that also need with parents of the students as well. So Sade.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura. And thank you everybody for being here today, because ultimately, as Jeff said, there's an issue, but we need everyone on board, all hands on deck, as it said. When it comes to the Parent Institute for Quality Education, we have a partnership with our parents, we have a partnership with the schools, and over the course of the pandemic, with 9,000 to 11,000 parents going through our workshops every quarter, we noticed that we needed to take an assessment, so to speak, of what was happening to our families at the time once the pandemic began. And as the review of what happened on our February meeting, it's basically just that our families were left in the dust, were left behind. The infrastructure in various areas, specifically in the Central Valley, we were looking at the infrastructure and the lack in support systems that were implemented, not only to support the adoption, support the connectivity, and support the literacy. And a lot of our families barely even had any knowledge when it came to connecting with their cell phones. So with that, creating some assessments and community engagements to really adhere and listen to the barriers that our parents were experiencing. Oftentimes it was misinformation or information not in their home language. And with more than 200 languages in the Valley, that support system was really lagging. And as we continued on surveying and hearing the stories of our families, and thank you, Phil, for providing that qualitative data, but those stories have so much weight to go alongside of those numbers to really hear the hardships of families who were working really hard. And there's this one thing that after listening to all of our families, I ended up writing an article called The Perfect Storm, because our families were really experiencing this huge wave of disparities coming from all directions when it came to being almost shut out of access, of resource, of need, of opportunity. And with that, we knew that it was very imperative not only for us to really support our families one-on-one, but also to look out of ourselves and to really see how can we better support, how can we bring their stories to light, because oftentimes we were seeing that certain areas, especially here in the rural area, they were left behind. Funding was only going to certain major cities. And although we do see some movement in particular areas as we are statewide, there's still huge gaps in resources and opportunities. And not only are we seeing it as it trickles down from the parents into the students, but then also just leading into this generational lack of access. And when we're looking back and looking forward, if we're not taking intensely action right now, we know that there is going to be more and more disparities. And with that, allowing our families to have a space to be heard, I think, was extremely important. And not only hearing them, but being able to partner with our families to let them know that they would be at the table to help support whatever was coming forward, because oftentimes we had these initiatives coming down and not really comprehending what was happening down at the ground level. So well-intended initiatives funded very well, but ultimately down at the ground level, it wasn't being implemented, let alone the access of a variety of providers was huge here in the rural area. We have even some families who would have to choose whether it's food for the family or let's get some internet access, or even I work with other organizations that work with the elderly. So it's either prescriptions or being able to talk to my care provider via video. So these were the stories that we were listening to and the hardships that our families were experiencing. And now that we have been able to accumulate these stories, it was our responsibility to actually take some action and to not just sit on these on this issue.
Thank you, Sade. I'm curious, in building those relationships, one of the things that we hear consistently is being a trusted messenger and engaging. How did you go about doing that? And where did you find that? What did you find was most successful about that?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So when we're working with families, small rural communities, different walks of life, you have to build that trust in order to help support them with anything that they may need. And what we first did, since we have 7 regional offices, we have some of our staff were previous BCAE parents. And so allowing us to really connect with our internal staff who had a really solid relationship with their community, solid relationships with the upcoming cohort that was coming in the next quarter. So we connected with our recruiters who were previous parents and trained them on how to work with our families one-on-one to help the adoption, to provide the information in their home language. And in that first year, we did over 60,000 phone calls. And this is sometimes even a repeat call just to ensure that that family did get access or did get the provider necessary to support the connection. And also the partnerships. That is huge. I'm a huge advocate for not working in silos and making sure that if someone is doing it well, and if someone's a trusted person or a trusted organization in the community, why not connect with them to ensure that the people that we're working with or the community that we're working in is actually benefiting from all the support systems and the resources that we have at our hands. And as we go forward, we've, like I mentioned, taking those stories and really hearing them, we're advocating outside of our workshops and kind of thinking about what we've been doing since the pandemic. That's basically it. We created a whole external relations department because we felt that we have an imperative obligation to ensure that we were not only working with our families close knit in our workshops, but then also taking whatever we were listening to and taking it out into collaborations, coalitions, making sure that we were supporting with letters of action when it came to any kind of bill or policy that was being moved. And not to mention bringing our families straight to the people who were those influential representatives for their districts or even for their city, and giving them the tools and the support necessary so they felt confident enough and poised enough to be able to speak their truth and their experience to those individuals. And as we go forward, we've also implemented some digital literacy capacities to support the adoption within our own curriculum. Not to mention, we created we call it an internal app, so to speak, and it not only helps our families to kind of play with in a safe space with these new skill sets, but also give them that practice and the know-how on how to be engaged in their home language. So everything that we've done has been extremely intentional. And as we've gone forward, ensuring that we are walking hand in hand with our parents as we go forward.
Actually, if I could also add one piece, Sade. Laura, Sade and I met in the backyard during the pandemic, because it also points out the challenge. Anchor institutions, we thought we were doing our job. We were working in one lane, and you had people like Sade and her organization, and then others that are working as trusted digital navigators with different ethnic groups in different neighborhoods, right? And we weren't really connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And so from those conversations has emerged the Fresno Coalition for Digital Inclusion. And it's unique because it's about infrastructure, it's about advocacy, it's also about all the way from the anchor institutions all the way over, I won't say up or down, it's about us being in partnership with the community-based organizations. It's that sort of new way of working together that is going to be essential to solving things.
I love it. Thank you so much. I think we talk a lot about silos, right? And people and organizations, people, what have you, working in silos. How do you break those down? How do you have those conversations, and how do you make those connections? And I love the fact that you guys met in the backyard during the pandemic.
Yes.
As part of that. So thank you both. I do see that Augustine is here, and we're taking a little bit of a step back and looking again at kind of like both the statewide approach as well as the local approach. So if we could go ahead and hear a little bit from you on the local approach, specifically, how does digital equity create those disparities in education, and then what sort of programs are you guys engaged with to help address those? And again, these are questions that can go on in the chat too. If as you guys are listening, if there's something that resonates with you, please let us know that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, and it was great information, and thank you for being flexible, and I'll be very, very succinct with my comments. But what I wanted to say on behalf of the California Emerging Technology Fund, if we really look at the digital equity in terms of the challenge it presents students, I think there's a lot of immediate challenges, but I think ultimately it's part of the factors that really contribute to our students not being able to really reach their full potential academically, and all of the impacts that has, right? So when we're looking at the potential that technology, when it's really carefully and well implemented, it's something that has a direct impact in terms of the the type of instruction that teachers can deliver, the type of connections that you can make with families, the type of engagement that you could see with students. And our schools now more than ever are experiencing even more challenges than before. So to us, for CETF, we really, even before the pandemic, looked at how do you support schools, especially Title I schools that already are dealing with so many things, with the effective implementation and integration of technology, and making sure that there's maximum impact in the way that that technology has in terms of helping students succeed academically, supporting the schools doing what they need to do, which is to raise student outcomes, in addition to closing that digital divide. That's why CETF designed and has been implementing school to home for a few years now. And it really is intended to be a system of support for our partner schools. We've been able to implement at a lot of some of our most challenged schools in urban and rural communities. And again, I think technology can be a very powerful tool, and I think everyone in this group agrees. But you also see that without the right support, it could be one more thing that adds to the many things that schools have to balance. So we've learned that it's better to have a comprehensive approach. We have our 10 core components, which are different areas that where we provide the support to the schools, ranging from things like the managing of equipment, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that even though schools and districts have gotten a little bit more familiar with, there's still a lot of schools when you go in and devices are being damaged at higher rates, or there needs to be recommendations and supports on how to replace devices and things like that. So supporting in that area, how to provide that support on the technical side, and then the broader sort of support that's going to have the impact in terms of the instruction, because you need to work with the school leadership to make sure that our administrators are clear on exactly how they see technology being used to advance their goals that they have for the school year. You need to make sure that there's the instructional support. I mean, we have a lot of teachers that have had to use technology. Maybe they have been a little bit more reluctant before the pandemic, but are they really able to use it at the highest levels where they could really personalize, where they could really address the needs of students, where they can really engage students and create those environments that we really need to make sure that we close the gaps that are there. So it's that support for teachers, what kind of coaching is available, providing some guidance to say, okay, this is how you can embed the technology, the instructional support onto some of the strategies that are being used to in different content areas. What does that look like? So again, it's working with the leadership, working with instruction, and the work of parents has been brought up. I think it's very important, and we actually try to take a step back and not only help the schools look at technology as a powerful tool and help with trainings for families on how they can use the devices, to extend the learning day, to support the initiatives that are happening at the school site, but also working with the staff a little bit so that they think about how they're building the capacity with parents, because they often don't have a lot of guidance and support. There needs to be some time to really reflect and think about, okay, how are we creating the opportunities for parents to come in and participate? Do we have the right environment that's inviting to our parents? Again, another thing that we see at schools is that it's been a challenge to reconnect with parents and community. So in addition to the device is the tool, but the strategy is really to help the schools connect with parents, right? How do you make it so that parents feel welcome, so that way they're the devices are used to connect with them at the times that are convenient with them, that they see. When I participated in workshops, parents want to know, what should my kids be working on? What are things that they could be doing? What kind of questions they have about how they're doing? So that requires both the work with parents, but also the work with the staff, so that they understand how to really nurture that relationship. So again, that goes back to the work, with parents. And we also do a lot of work, as I mentioned, when we're supporting schools and supporting staff, also a lot of convenings and bringing either within the district, within the region. We also have a statewide work where schools are coming in and saying, like, this is what's been working for us, creating those spaces where they can talk about how they're using technology to address some of the gaps that they're seeing to enhance the learning. And they like to get support from our team, but they love to hear what other teachers are doing and what other how administrators are handling certain things. So it's all those layers of support where, again, where we see the devices and the connectivity as the foundation, but we're really looking at, making sure that we have the support so they can take it to the next level, because it's a really critical time for public education, and we want to make sure that all of these investments that are being made and all of the work and all of the momentum that's there really has an impact in the digital equity and digital divide, and eventually it creates the educational outcomes that are really going to help our families and our students kind of move out of the circumstances that are challenging them now. So yeah, that's more or less what kind of summarizing the work that we've done.
Thank you so much. And it's interesting to just kind of, just as I'm listening and connecting the dots between everything that all four of you have said today, and what we're kind of going to what we're trying to do here too is create that sense of community, right? And help connect people and have the conversations that enable us to get to every single level and hopefully everybody that we want to and need to. If we can go ahead and bring the slides up, we're going to kind of make a pivot here. This is our conversation starter, and I hope that you were thinking about some of the things that resonated with you in this discussion. Next slide, if you would, please. And we're also, this is when we want to hear from you. So this is the raise your hand, and we'll call on you, unmute yourself, come into the conversation kind of thing. But we have a lot of folks that are here from schools, K-12, higher education, libraries. I know that there are community organizations that work with the populations that we've been talking about on the ground. Really want to hear from you. And so, well, we had a couple questions about the inequities in education that are existing currently, and then what programs are out there that either you work with or the organizations work with that are successful. Those are two questions to think about. But in addition to that, what we'd also like to hear is, so how have you, if you are somebody who has experienced just maybe, I grew up in the rural Central Valley between Fresno and Visalia off 99. So internet access there was very challenging. So maybe you happen to live in a rural area and you've been impacted personally by that, or are there individuals that you have worked with that have had an impact for a variety of barriers to connecting to the digital world? And then have you also potentially, if that's affected you, have you worked with organizations that have helped? And if so, what was helpful about that? And if you are an organization, do you have programs that help address these? So those are kind of the things that we want to hear from you right now as part of the discussion. And you guys were great last time. We had a lot to say, and we'd like to just see some hands go up, kind of get it started. Because you know me, I might start calling on you. I know you. right, Brian. I'm sorry, Bill.
Oh, okay.
I was conflating the Bill and the Britain, and I just made it into Brian. So I apologize.
Great. I was having problems translating that. That's awesome. All right. So I guess we transposed it. So here's the thing that I see that's a very interesting disconnect. I just attended MWC, which is the microwave conference, wireless conference held in Barcelona. And what I see is a phenomena occurring for all of us, which is fiber and telecoms are getting bigger. They're getting more expensive, and they're delivering more expensive packages, payloads, and systems for us to utilize. And the concern that I have in all these discussions, which are extremely valid, they're amazingly valid, is the complexity it's going to take to run these large scale systems. And we can't support that. I mean, as a university, I can't keep people employed because Silicon Valley is taking them faster than I can get them through my hiring process. So the challenge we have is, how do we build networking support for the future that the parents, the school systems are not overcommitted in order to support the student and the student learning process, which means we have to find a way to really simplify the solution set, not follow the path of the larger telecoms that is actually making it harder for us to do business. I think that's our major challenge that we have to address for the future, is how to keep it simple enough to be useful and utilized by the population at large.
Thank you, Bill. Are you seeing any programs in your community, maybe helping some of the college students or university students that have been, kind of successful in this?
The answer is yes, but it's really interesting that they're all tied to the large telecom. Let's get you access to fiber. Let's get you. I mean, again, it's almost as if all the dollars are being chased by the larger entities, and that those dollars are going to be spent in that broadband perspective, not in that last mile, not in simplifying the equation set for the individual user to have access and just be able to plug in and do. And I think that's kind of a motto we have to remember, is it's got to be as simple as plugging in to be able to do my homework and store it.
It's a really good point, and thank you for bringing us back to that. I appreciate it.
Laura, I'm sorry, this is Sade. I just have a quick comment regarding what Bill just mentioned about really looking at those individuals who are receiving the funding, and because they're either well known or, hey, they did really great last quarter or last year, let's go ahead and give them some more. Well, as Phil mentioned earlier, the partnerships that we've established here in the Fresno County has been extremely intentional to kind of negate that in the future by collaborating with different stakeholders across the county. We've kind of came together and said, look, this is our large scope. These are the numbers that we are doing individually, and this is what we can do collectively, and really making sure that there's a solution through the whole connection, from the first mile all the way down to the last mile. Because as we know, if we're really not being intentional, oh yeah, well, we have that money and that funding to really ensure that the infrastructure is solid, but if the person who's receiving it, as you said, is not really able to adopt and have access with the connection, it's as if we're just throwing money in the air. And so our hope is, as we've been working really intentionally in the Valley, we're hoping that it becomes almost like a catalyst of more partnerships going across. And this is something that I have been hearing from the LA area and recently in like the upper part of the Valley, because the work that's being done intentionally, collaborating and ensuring that we, as different stakeholders, as the work that we're doing across different sectors, is really intentionally supporting the overall ability and access in this digital age.
Thank you, Sade. And this is the kind of conversation that we want to get going. So if somebody says something or you see something in chat and you want to respond to that, please raise your hand, because we want to hear if you hear from Bill and you're like, oh my goodness, that really resonates, or I have a thought about that. That's the kind of conversation that we want to hear. So please keep it coming. Raina.
Hi, everybody. Well, thanks for having me back again.
Absolutely.
So I'm a very rural, tiny district. by Sacramento. We actually had our PK parent graduation last week. So thank you, go PK. We kind of on a smaller scale of what was just said, like fiber doesn't necessarily help us because it's not even available where we are, right? And so all of the funding and all of the grants and everything that we could possibly do to help get connectivity is fiber based. And so even if, you know, what we're seeing is families who can afford private network connections can go out and they have the resources to get the faster connection and have their kids take online classes, and families who can't afford internet at all are left so far behind. That gap is so wide between like what we're going to call the haves and have-nots. And so even as a district, we can provide hotspots, we can provide devices, we can provide some level of parent training, but we're seeing that gap so wide between student access at 5-year-old level, right? We're talking TK and kinder, students who grew up with technology in the home and students who didn't. And then parents trying to navigate, oh, guess what? This year we're doing online registration. And we have families that don't know how to access services just to function at the most basic level in a public school district. And so organizations like PK, School to Home we did when we first went one-to-one. I provide parent training, but we need like a systemic plan, because I'm not the only tiny district. I'm not the only rural district. And unless we can get like a framework where we get these big fiber internet, whoever is providing service companies to understand like that's great, but those federal dollars aren't benefiting districts like mine, and they're not benefiting students like mine, because although on paper it looks really nice, in practice it's not benefiting those that need it the most.
Thank you, Raina. I want to ask a question, not specifically connected to fiber, because I am acknowledging what you're saying about the fiber. What I do want to know is, have you seen or how have you seen families either be able to take advantage of the Affordable Connectivity Program in your community, or has that been a challenge as well? So I know we're talking kind of about availability, but I'm also really curious what sort of solutions have been out there that may be working for you that other school districts could learn from. Oh, hang on. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry. So we ran, like when the connectivity program first dropped, we ran like parent support nights. And so we actually had parents come. Winters has a pretty high percentage of parents that signed up. I wish that there were more, but we only have one provider in town that like fit the bill. We have 2 internet providers total, like district wide. And only one of them like is in the area where most of the folks live for that. So, you know, when we helped parents apply, if not all of them qualified, most of them are getting, reduced and or free internet. And then folks that either didn't qualify, but, claimed hardship or need, we provide hotspots. And so that's still just kind of how we're working that. I had a family just show up today and say, hey, my internet isn't working. I don't know when they're going to come out and fix it. Can we get a hotspot? So we provide them no cost to all families in district if they ask for one.
That's amazing. Thank you. I wanted to kind of also understand where that connection was, and what might be happening with ACP, because again, it always comes down to, is it available in your area? So and
like I think we're lucky in that we do have a provider that is on the list, right? And what's funny is when we go to apply and it's like choose all the providers possible, and we're like this one, if they're not on that part of town where that provider is available, then they just don't qualify, and then that's on us to try to kind of bridge that gap ourselves, right, by providing hotspots. So
thank you. Thank you for continuing to come and share a perspective. Really do very much appreciate it. Jason.
Hi, I work at Santa Cruz County Office of Education, and some things we've been doing here specifically related to partnerships. I know Sade really mentioned the importance of partnerships and local partnerships. We have a local internet service provider. During the pandemic, they actually connected homes free of charge. And with that model, they created a whole program specifically for families called Equal Access Santa Cruz across the whole county. And what they did there is they actually received funding through our local community foundation, another partner, to provide funding and backhaul to provide these families very low cost internet at $5 or $10 a month. This was even before ACP occurred. And so they would actually look to our county office of education and work with our 10 school districts in the county to verify eligibility directly instead of working with the big telecoms. So it was a great small local partnership. And then on the side note too, on devices, we actually work with a local reseller, refurbished seller called Santa Cruz Technology Exchange that provide devices. And one thing around that too is kind of just you have your foundational devices and internet access, but really wanted to engage families in literacy and understanding digital literacy. So this tech exchange also provided classes as well for families in both English and Spanish. And so the opportunity to not only engage these partners in the ability to support the local foundational elements between connectivity, devices, as well as broadband, but also secondarily the piece around literacy trainings and making sure families know what to experience, what to expect when their teenager gets online in your house. We brought in My Digital Tattoo as well to provide support around understanding the social aspect of teenagers with online gaming, online social media, et cetera. Because that's a big piece. I think we don't want to forget around families and parents understanding how to engage with their students around these potentially very successful tools to engage with their peers across the world, but also some things that can cause issues as well at homes. And so we want to make sure that's at the forefront as well before we provide the devices to the children and the homes.
Thanks, Jason. I have a question kind of about the programs. Just knowing where you guys are geographically located and that you have a pretty wide area that you support. And I'm curious, are you finding, sorry, I'm trying to get you unmuted there. Are you finding that you're able to partner with, a couple companies that are or organizations that are able to serve most of the area, or are you finding like, okay, we really need, and I'm asking this because I know we've got districts and counties that experience the same thing, right? Large areas. And do you have organizations that you are like, nope, this community, we really are focused on that, maybe because there's a predominant language there that is spoken that maybe one organization really focuses on?
Yeah, the biggest issue we had was the topology in different areas of our county specifically. What Cruzo does is they have this wireless broadband infrastructure that does line of sight technology to connect homes. Obviously, we live in a very, where the farm meets the ocean and the redwoods. And so in the very rural area of the redwood forest, it's very hard to get this line of sight when there's a big redwood tree in the way. And so with that, there's connecting, and what we wanted to engage with their expertise around network connectivity and backhaul. Right, we don't have that necessarily that full expertise at the school level. So developing this network expertise and bringing in backhaul, and they have their own partners where they can partner with other ISPs that are local as well. For example, Cruzo Internet, who helped support us during this event, during the pandemic, they connected a whole migrant labor farm camp of about 125 families in Watsonville, California, where we actually they used AT&T backhaul to be able to provide their infrastructure, but they set up all the us access directly on the site, but they used AT&T's backhaul that was leased through the district specifically. So it's a partnership, and they help develop that and to help us connect those partners, as well as help provide the infrastructure and the expertise at these labor camps specifically.
That's amazing. I like the diversity in the approach, and I think I'm also curious. I know we've got other folks here from districts that have kind of a lot of geographical topography challenges. I'm also wondering in working with providers and identifying kind of those organizations that you can work with. Are you leaning, it sounds like you're leaning so much more on people who are really in the community, understand the community and the kids, and and the needs there. Is that an accurate representation? And what could other county offices that are in similar situations, what could they look at as an approach that might be similar in success to what you've been doing?
Yeah, I think the more home connectivity process, especially for these families who are unwary of big telecoms and very, they're concerned about these people with these big trucks coming to their neighborhood to install these pieces of equipment, whereas the local community members of this one company just come in and do the work, and then they have partners and they're pretty established in the businesses. So having that credibility around local businesses and these businesses that these families frequent as well. And so keeping the money internally as well in our county, I think is key, because then ultimately it helps our whole economy in our local county as well. And just going through some of the helping with specifically, I think ACP is a wonderful program, but it's a lot of red tape to go through and to streamline that a lot through these local businesses, I think, and developing those partnerships, I think cut some of that out of the loop. We also, which is big too, is at the countywide level, is making sure we work with the districts on applying for emergency connectivity fund the last couple of years, because really that takes a whole another loop out of it, where you're making sure that parents are engaged in provide the opportunity, but more now at district level, and the districts can contract with those telecoms to get that into the homes. So I think that's a nice leverage as well through ECF.
Got it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Phil, I did see that your hand was up, and wondered if you wanted to respond to anything that was being said, or if that was kind of a legacy hand.
It's legacy, but I'll just raise it. I think there's more complexity in affordability, adoption, availability, and quality and speeds. There's an interdynamic play there that often the carriers say, well, gosh, there's service available there, but that we really need to think about as educational leaders in our state. I've gotten sort of schooled on that. We've got people at Fresno Housing making $10,000 a year. Okay, well, that's a grocery versus internet decision, right? And also, and that's why Education Superhighway has recognized the number of MD people residents living in multi-dwelling units. The maps aren't correct; they're a high priority. But we need to think about different models. So, like a place-based Wi-Fi in an apartment complex, right? That's one thing. And then the other thing is, how do we make sure that there's structurally less expensive internet service in areas of poverty? A subscriber model, yes, but ACP is going away, folks, unless you know otherwise. We do need something like the CASA funding to be better funded in California. We've got to have some structural ways to ensure that, one, these funds land where they're most needed in urban and rural areas of poverty, but two, that they're sustainable so that we can get landlords to go, no, not having internet all the way to the unit or not having it on your campus, those aren't choices anymore. But they're going to remain choices for the next 5, 10, 15 years unless we do something. And education as a lobby, if you will, for good, should lean into this nonpartisan issue of getting everyone connected. It creates a better workforce, more entrepreneurs, healthier families. It's a win. We're probably the one group that can lean in the most with better mapping. We've shown examples of how that can be done, better focus on equitable investments, and really lean into doing our part to make sure there's connectivity, because every one of our households, has a stakeholder from every one of our anchor institutions. If we don't play well with the city, the county, the healthcare, and we don't all play better together, we're just not going to move the needle on this like we need to. Thanks, Laura.
Absolutely. And also just bringing it back to kind of digital equity as a whole. Obviously, infrastructure is a huge piece of that, but we also have to have the availability of devices, and then the training and skills to be able to use those as well. So it's all part of the big conversation around this. So thank you everyone for that. Before we move on, I just want to open a space for people to share anything that we're missing, anything that you would like to see be part of the discussion as we move forward. So I'm just going to pause, and if you want to raise your hand and add something to the conversation, please do so. Wendy. Wendy, can you hear us? Wendy, we are not hearing anything from you. Oh, you can hear me. Do you want to put it in chat? And I know that's not ideal, but we would like to hear from you if that's okay. No, we can't. I can see what you're putting in chat though. Wendy, if it's okay, we're going to let you keep typing in the chat. And oh, there we go. Wait, that's Philip. I'm going to go ahead and call on Walter for right now. And Wendy, if you can, we'll come back to you and see if you can unmute. Hi, Walter.
Hi, boy, this technology is challenging, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, anyway, Wally Simbab, South Bay City's Council of Governments. And I just, because you're pausing here, I just thought I would explain why I'm here. It's interesting to me that the state, we talked about silos early on, and that the state has actually addressed this problem as a set of silos. And so I intend to go to the education one and the civic one and so forth, because I'm listening to hear what all of you are saying. And the reason is what we've got planned, and we are going to use our LADA grant to go after this, is a neighborhood institution that integrates all of it. And so when you start looking at the problems you're talking about with literacy and adoption and affordability and so forth, it can all be taken care of through a neighborhood institution that is looking out for the digital needs of that neighborhood, which basically addresses every issue I've heard today, which is what I was hoping to test. And we don't know whether it's the right or wrong thing to do. There is a tradition in the telecommunications world of public access, where it was the right thing to do to give people opportunities to produce for the network that they were now going to subscribe to. And then I personally did a demonstration project in the 90s for proof of concept for this sort of thing. It became a programmable building that you can program it to be whatever needs you want. So there's a maker space, but there's also a service space where you can do distance education and telemedicine and so forth. And so what we'd like to do is some pilot studies, some pilot demonstration in 3 different disadvantaged communities in the South Bay of exactly this idea. And I can't really explain. It's a fairly complicated phenomenon, but we can do commercial redevelopment with it. We can do resilience centers with it. We can make it air conditioned so that it's a place where people go to avoid the heat. We can have always on electricity through having its own solar generation. So it's done, and we also control a middle mile network that provides a 1 gig, 10 gig service below market. And so it's basically the idea is digital equity is not exactly everyone can subscribe to a network, but in other words, what we're saying is you can get sort of minimal stuff at home, even if you can't, it's hard to afford, or you can get really, really good stuff if you want to share it. And that's what we're trying to do, is put together a shared facility. Like I say, it's public access used to do it. My own project, the Blue Line Televillage, did it. And we're hoping to get funding after the LADA grant in order to actually demonstrate this in 3 different neighborhoods. And an earlier speaker mentioned neighborhood networks. And this is what this would be. So I just want to let everybody know I will be here to continue listening to you, because I think it's really interesting. And I will also be attending the other 4 and just being aware that they're all silos and we're trying to bring them together. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Walter. Appreciate the feedback. Strat.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I just want to take the opportunity to plug, the Voice for the Older Adults. So I heard a lot about, elementary school, younger folks, but I think, as we're doing this planning, I hope we can keep top of mind. This is also something that really applies to older adults. For folks are having to work longer, they're also losing their jobs. So for them to have the tools and the access to broadband so that they can retool, continue with their education, so to remain part of the economy and society is really going to be important. And I hope that we can intentionally also be thinking about programs and offerings that will address issues that older adults are facing. I appreciate Sade touched on it earlier in her talk. But just definitely wanted to take the opportunity to plug the importance for older adults so that we can think about that too.
Thank you. No, that's always a good reminder. We do work very closely with the California Department of Aging, and they have been part of this process. So hopefully we can also elevate the conversation there as well. So thank you. I wanted to respond, Wendy, you put in chat, could technology education and lifelong education be part of the conversation? And the answer is yes, because especially as we're looking at the digital skills and the digital literacy piece of digital equity, that is part of education. And I hope I'm getting your question right. And if I'm not, please correct me in chat. But also just wanted to say that yes, that is by default kind of a big part of the conversation, is what those skills look like, not just in the short term, but in the long term and lifelong as well. So I hope that addressed that. Kevin?
So thank you. I'm Kevin Flash from the Los Rios Community College District, and looking at higher education, what we did at some of our community colleges was to be able to do two things. Number one, we actually looked at the computer needs of our students, and they were very varied. We know that there's some students who are engaged in things like computer science programming, and some just maybe doing some more GE types of classes. And so we really worked on a program that received devices from the state, surplus devices. We were able to refurbish them and then turn them around for free to our students. And so I think when we look and talk about sustainability, we need to look at ways that aren't just taking some funding that we get and buying Chromebooks, which may be suitable to some, not suitable to others, but really tapping into the refurbishing and the donation of used devices and having those refurbished to be able to be given out to the students, much more cost effective and much more suiting the needs of those students who really need those. The second thing is looking at the digital skills and digital literacy. What we did do is set up a student technology help desk at each of the colleges where students could walk in and really notice that there were a variety of needs, kind of stratifying it in two ways. One was basically, hey, my computer, how do I set it up? How do I connect to the internet? And getting that level of skills. And we were able to kind of train technicians to be able to answer those quickly and engage our librarians with that type of skill as well. But then we noticed the second layer too is navigating those educational systems. And we needed another level of training to our digital navigators to be able to say, hey, this is how you get through documents, whether using Microsoft products or those Google documents. Here's how you get them into the system that your teacher or instructor is using. So looking at that growth in digital skills and digital navigators, really looking forward to create the curriculum that really meets that sector as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate that. Scott, I did see that you had your hand up, and I think we can wrap up with your comment and then move on to our next section.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Sorry, I'm a little bit displaced right now by power and internet at home, but I think responding to Strat's comment, I wanted to reiterate that although a lot of the conversation today focused on K-12 education, like this working group has brought together entities that are invested in education, throughout the life spectrum, whether it's K-12, community colleges, the universities or beyond. So definitely adult education, and wanted to go back to the guidance that the state has received from the NTIA, and there's very strict instruction to develop a state equity plan that addresses the digital equity barriers for 8 covered populations. And so, you know, older adults, seniors 60 and above are, you know, critical groups that we must, you know, seek to overcome digital equity barriers with this community and direct investments to address those. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that we're centering on the 8 covered populations, and so that's it.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, I am going to kind of move into our next section. If we could go to the next slide, please. We are going to talk about how you can take action. We have some updates from activities that were in process the last time that we met. And so I'm going to hand it over to Rich Navas to provide an update on these and how you can take action.
Thank you, Laura. Hi, everyone. I'm Rich Navas. I work as a principal with Broadband Equity Partnership. We are program advisors and consultants to the California Department of Technology on the state digital equity planning process. Many of you have heard me speak before about the surveys that are going to be rolled out. And there are 2 surveys that Californians will need to complete. One survey targeting organizations and one survey targeting California households. The Digital Equity Public Survey is the survey that targets California households to identify barriers to digital equity so that we can better understand what barriers are impacting broadband accessibility, affordability, and adoption. This tool is going to be available in 14 languages with audio functionality for those languages as well. And we are going to make paper surveys available, condensed versions of the paper surveys available at the public events that are coming up. So please stay tuned. More information is forthcoming, and we would love your help to be able to promote the public survey with families and other stakeholders that you deal with, other communities that you deal with. Next slide. The other survey is the Digital Equity Ecosystem Mapping Tool. This tool is aimed at organizations, entities, state agencies, schools, faith-based organizations, nonprofits, any entity that leverages technology to help Californians get connected to a program and service. That is what we are aiming this tool to find out about. We want to understand what programs and services are being offered throughout the state of California to get people connected to the services they need. So this tool is actually now live. I've spoken about it at several different meetings, but I'm just so happy to announce that this tool is now live and it's ready for you to complete and share information with us about what you're providing at a very granular level. Next slide. So we have prepared an outreach toolkit. We're going to actually drop these links in the chat right now. We have an outreach toolkit that will actually help you promote this with your partner entities. So if you're a school administrator or a school teacher and you work with faith-based organizations that help you with some of the programming, with some of the connectivity related programming, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to know about what's happening. So please fill out this tool and please promote this toolkit with your partner networks. We are making the DEAM tool available in Spanish as well. So we hope that we can actually capture as much information about what's going on with programs and services related to broadband accessibility, affordability, and adoption throughout California. Next slide. In the toolkit, you will notice this particular collateral. You will see access to the DEAM survey, and you will see a QR code that people can scan. So I highly recommend that many of you who've spoken about some of your programs and services today, please go online, fill out the DEAM tool, let us know more about what programs and services you're offering to get Californians connected. Your voice is important in this, and it will help inform the state's digital equity plan to be more comprehensive and inclusive of what's really being offered out there. So thank you for your time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Thank you, Richna. So we also want to provide some additional ways to get involved. Some of you already have done this, but if you want to receive updates and on what is going on with Broadband for All, and specifically on the digital equity planning process, there's a link to sign up for that newsletter and update. As Richna shared, we would love to have, if you are with an organization, please complete that DEEM tool, because that helps us get an understanding of programs that are available out there in California. We learn more every time that we have conversations with all of these groups. If you can also, once it's available, we'll make this an update that goes out to everyone. But once we have the digital equity public survey, we would like that to be something that you share out with people that you know, and just help communicate and get the message out about why it is important to help. I feel like I'm doing a newscast or a public service announcement, but it really is important for us to hear the voices of the individuals that are being affected. Continue to participate in these outcome area working groups. And that includes providing feedback to us about what's working or what you might want to see in these meetings, and how we can help facilitate that. And then we will be posting up very soon our first round of local events. So once those go up on our website, we would love for you to find one that is in your area and come and talk to us. Also let people know that those are happening. So those are just a few of the ways that you can get involved and help this process move forward and have your voice be a part of the process. So that's what we're really hoping to have happen. So next slide, please, Mel. One more. So the next steps for our working group, and not to get ahead of the next slide, but our next meeting is going to be in May. So we have a gap in there. And so in that interim, we'll be looking at developing strategies that align with the digital equity priorities. Some of those will be gathered. We'll be gathering the information from the DEEM tool and from the public survey in that time. So some of that will be going into helping inform that, and then looking at that to conduct a gap analysis. So essentially, where are we missing things, and how do we bridge that? And then looking at putting all of that together for recommendations to go into the digital equity plan. So next slide. We have 2 more meetings that are scheduled. We have one in May, and we're going to be focusing on, and we've talked about this, we do continue to talk about this, and we hope that you will be bringing friends to the table, organizations that you might work with. We will continue to try and bring more people to the table in conversation as well, but what programs are working really well in the community, and what might be missing. So we'll be identifying some of those through your feedback to the DEEM tool, but we also really want to hear in conversation what might be missing in your community. And then in June, we'll be taking a look at the cumulative data that is being gathered from the public survey and the DEEM data, and then looking at how that can inform the draft that will be made publicly available in mid to late 2023. So those are kind of our next steps. If you do want to get a hold of us, we posted this before. These slides will be up on the portal and the website shortly, and feel free to send us emails if you want to, and we would love to help continue the conversation. So that is all we have today. I want to thank you for your time. I really want to thank everyone, especially knowing that as we are scattered across California, all of us are contending with a tremendous amount of weather. So thank you for taking the time to be here today. I hope that you all stay safe. I hope that we get to see you again in May. And in the interim, please feel free to reach out to us and have a conversation about what we talked about here today.